Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of my Sansui AU-9900 repair and restoration. In the first part, we changed out the electrolytic capacitors in the driver power supply, the equalizer unit, and the protection unit. And now we're going to continue on with the restoration. I hope you enjoy it. If you enjoy vintage audio equipment, you've come to the right spot. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell, as well as giving me a big thumbs up if you like this video and share it with others. There is a risk of serious injury or death from electrical shock working on this equipment. If you're not comfortable with working on the equipment, please do not take the cover off and consult a professional. We're going to work on the F2580 driver assembly next. That's this assembly right down here, and as if you may remember, I had mentioned in the first part of this video that someone had been working on it before, and they had marked up the connectors and some of the circuit boards. And as I mentioned before, I really don't have an issue with that. It was just somebody trying to be careful. So what you've got to be really careful with these driver assemblies, and all the units are different, but there is somewhere in the power amp area, either at the driver unit or even on the heat sinks themselves, there's a bias transistor in almost all of these units that are, it could be a receiver, it could be a integrated amplifier like this, or a straight amplifier. And the reason I mention that is, if you're not familiar with working on these units, those bias transistors are almost impossible to get in most units, and they're very easy to damage at the same time. And that's another one of those things, you may not even know you've got them until it's too late. You can fix a lot of things in these units if something goes wrong, but those bias transistors are very difficult. And when I was working on my BA5000 Sansui power amp, I had severe issues with the bias transistors because somebody had worked on it and just taped them up, and it took a lot of time. You just don't want to have to screw with that. It's not like something maybe you're not going to be able to fix, but it's going to take a lot of effort and time, and something you don't want to do. So what we can do right now is probably we ought to go up and take a look at the top. It looks like, first of all, you can see you've got to the driver unit these connectors that go right up here to where the power transistors are. So that looks like that unhooks, right? From the driver assembly. And also, I think I see behind here, just again from experience, I think those are the bias transistors. I see a screw here and a screw here. If I take this guy off just for a second, you see that screw, and I can tell there's two little wires, little white wires running from the driver assembly, and there's a bias transistor inside that little round tube, and that's what you got to be careful of. There's one there, and it's right here. If you can see right there, there's another screw. So that's one of those things, you could loosen this, and you think it's all loose, and then you end up screwing up those bias transistors. So you got to just be careful of that. You undo that screw and then they're loose, right? You're not going to be trying to yank the thing out of here. So and it's always a good idea, even if you don't have to loosen them, even if they're in a configuration you don't, it's just smart to take this screw out, no matter what we find out we've got to do, and let those just hang loose, and so nothing bad can happen to them. I guess we got to go up to the top here for a minute and just see what we've got up there. I've got the AU-9900 laying flat now. In the last part of the video, we had it up on its side. What we're trying to get at is apparently under this cover, the driver unit. So I'm going to go ahead and take the screws out of that cover. It looks like there's 2 screws, and see what we have. Alright, I've removed that cover, and it looks like up here we just have this one connector that looks like he'll pull right out. So let me do that. Yeah. And he is keyed. You know, remember I was talking about, you know, there's some of them are keyed, some of them are not. He is keyed, so it's almost impossible to put that back on incorrectly, because there's a single pin, then there's a space, then there's 3 pins. So we won't worry about really marking this guy up. There's only one cable, it can only go one place, right? So we'll go ahead and just leave him as is, and I think that's the only thing that I see from the top that needs to be unhooked. And just by the way, way down there in the bottom is one of the bias transistors that we're worried about, that we saw from the other side, and the other one's right there, kind of like right down in here in the middle, but all the way down in the bottom of the chassis. Okay, I've got the AU-9900 back on its side after we took the cover off at the top of the driver assembly to see what we had. We unhooked that one cable. We're going to go ahead and unhook these guys, and as I said, somebody previously marked them, so we're good to go here, right? 6 or 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. As I said, it's always better, no matter if this comes out in one unit or not, and it looks like it probably would, but it's always better to know where those bias transistors are. You just don't want to break them. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and take that one screw out here. Right. Alright. And we're going to go over here to this one, which also, let's see here. Get her loose. Alright. Just because we can, right? Yeah, those guys are loose. It looks like, and you never know what you're gonna run into here, but certainly looks like if we undo this screw, I dropped it in the chassis, right? We'll get her. I see her, actually. We'll get her. That's another thing, right? It just happens. Good thing it's on its side. Didn't have far to fall, right? I've even picked these things up and shook them trying to find a screw. So that guy's right there too. So we'll get him. Boy, this feels pretty darn loose. Don't it? Is that gonna be it? Well, what do you know? Well, whoever designed this, that's pretty darn easy, huh? I wish it was all that easy. We've got a couple, we've got some wire soldered on the back, but holy smokes, right? I've got this thing right out in my hand. So isn't that nice? You know, we'll go ahead and replace the capacitors we need to do on here. And as you saw, well, we didn't have to worry about the bias transistors, did we? They're right here mounted. We're not too worried about them. So I'll go ahead and put the screws back in there so we know where they are. We don't forget them. They're not in the way. And I'll get some capacitors together, and you know, we'll do the driver card work. I've got the capacitors together for the 2580 driver board. We've got 4 electrolytics we're going to change, a couple bipolar. Once again, whatever brands you like. These happen to be Nishnikon. You know, just buy a quality capacitor, buy a name brand, and you can't go wrong. Gonna again use a couple film capacitors. There's a couple 1 microfarad 50 volt electrolytics that we're going to change out with film capacitors, 1 microfarad 63 volt. So we're going to use those. So let's get started. Once again, on this assembly, like in the other assemblies that we've been working on, the larger capacitors have this glue down here right at the base of them. And this was done when they flow soldered the boards. It kept these parts in place and wouldn't allow them to shift around. You know, again, you just got to take your time. You got to be careful. You know, like I mentioned in the last video, again, X-Acto knife works real well. Don't have to do anything crazy. You just break, you just get in there and you break up this glue a little bit. You don't have to worry about hurting anything under here. There's only the 2 leads that go down through the board, so you don't have to worry about cutting through something. But I don't know if you guys can notice that. I hadn't really hit over on this other side, but now we got a little wiggle in her. You see that? And that's a good thing, right? When we go on the other side to unsolder it. This guy, not so much. So let's hit him a little bit more, get down under there. Oh yeah, he's much better, isn't he? So he gives us the impression that, hey, he's loosened up some. So when we unsolder this, he should come out. So what you can do too, this is another option. I showed you with a Hacko 808 desoldering tool. What a nice tool that is, right? To unsolder these larger capacitors and smaller ones too. So I'm going to try here a different method. I'm going to just, you know, assume that you don't have a desoldering tool. And what you do is you go in here, as we just did, and loosen these capacitors up enough so you can wiggle them around. So it gives you a good feeling they're fairly loose. And what you can do is just put your thumb, you know, on the lead that you're going to remove. There's 2 leads here on these capacitors, right? Just push on it a little bit. Don't get too crazy, right? Hope I can show you this. Let me get my camera a little better. Yeah, maybe that's good. And you see how these are both bent over flat. I don't know if you can see that or not, but they are. They're not just straight down in like a lot of the components are straight in. They put these in, bent the pins, and then glued them to hold them in place. So what we're going to try to do is heat this up, and at the same time I'm going to be pulling. Not pulling, I should say not pulling, but pressing this direction. So let's try that and see if we can get this 1 pin out. And make sure I'm showing it on my camera. I'm looking at the camera. I don't want to glare you out because I got to get right here. So can I do that? Let's try it. Okay, I got it hot and I pulled it right out. All right, can you see that here? Now normally I'd use my desoldering gun, right? But I know a lot of you guys don't, so I want to show you another method of how to get these out, and usually safely. You just got to make sure you get that glue loose. But I hope you can see that 1 pin is out now, right? And so what are we going to do on the next? Now that the 1 pin's out, we can do the same thing with the other one, right? We can just pull him right out, or hopefully we can. So I'm going to try to get this so you can see it again. Hopefully I'm on camera and it's not all glared out. But I'm gonna, let's see, hold this guy down and heat him. And now I'm pulling on him. And there he just came out in my hand. I don't know if you saw that or not, but he came right on out in my hand. Now, you know, like I say, there is no right or wrong. Everybody does rework on these units differently. The whole thing is, are you successful? Kind of like a guitar player, right? There's some people that the way they hold a guitar, they shouldn't be able to play, but they're damn good, right? So it works for them. I just wanted to show you another method. Okay, and it's off to the races here. Let's get this board, get the electrolytic capacitors changed out of here. These are, you know, approaching 45 years old. You know, I mean, that's just above and beyond how long they should go. Okay, we've gotten our 4 electrolytics changed out, these two and these two, couple bipolars that were here, and then we changed out 2 of those little electrolytics, those 1 microfarad electrolytics for film. So I think she's all set to go and ready to start another 20 years or so of service. You know, these units, I really believe they'll be around in 100 years. You know, somebody will have to be servicing this down the road, I'm sure. But I don't think there's any reason this unit can't be one day have its 100th birthday. Hopefully, I won't be around, but hopefully somebody will celebrate it. As I said, you know, this board was pretty easy to get out. You know, just a few wires here on the back, and she's ready to go. I think now I'll pull out the heatsink and power transistor assemblies. I think the way it looks like there's a total of 8 screws, and these look like separate units, so it's like 4 per unit on the left and the right channel. And why put the driver assembly back in right now? I think I'll take these guys out and service them. So it looks like, again, we've got our cable. Our previous worker had marked our cables for us, so it looks like these guys would have to come off. That's all I see. I'm looking up in there. I don't see anything else. So let's just see what we get. I mean, I've got the whole unit. I just took the whole unit out, so that's nice. That came out quite easily, right? And what we'll do is it looks like this unit has the original Sanken output transistors, which is again nice, right? Nice to have. Now we'll get the other one out of the chassis. We'll go ahead and get the screws out of this guy. I'm going to reseat these original Sanken output transistors. You know, once again, it's like everything else. These guys are approaching 45 years old. Wouldn't it be nice for them to make it another 45 years? And they may. Reseating these, what I'll do is I'll remove each transistor. There's 4 transistors per channel, total of 8. And I'll install a new mica insulator. You know, these are still available. This is just another example. Most of the stuff is available still. These came from either DigiKey or Mauser, one or the other, and they're still available. So we'll put a new one of those in, and we'll also put in some new thermal joint compound. It's just a smart thing to do. You know, keep these guys running cool, and there's a very good chance, as I said, they'll be there for another 45 years for somebody else to do what I'm going to do today. So we're going to get started with that. In this unit, you know, they're all a little bit different. The setups of them are all a little bit different. In this one's case, there's 2 screws. You're going to pull these 2 screws, and this transistor is going to come right out in my hand. One thing I will say about doing this particular job, this compound, it's some messy stuff. You know, it just is. There's no way to do this without getting a little bit of a mess. So you know, just expect that, and also very, very, very thin layer of thermal compound, both on the heatsink side of that insulator and also on the transistor side of that insulator, but very thin. Just think thin. If you can see something on it, you're probably good to go. That's probably the biggest mistake people make. You know, they put a big old thick gob of it on there, and it's not necessary, and actually it'll reduce the heat transfer. So it should be very, very thin. So let's get started. So there's 2 screws for each transistor. Once again, it's always best just do 1 at a time, or do 2 at a time. I say 1 at a time just because it's just less mistakes can be made. So we just pull these, unscrew these screws that you can probably see there hanging on the end of my screwdriver, and what you do is right here, you can just grab it with your finger, the power transistor, and just rock it a little bit. It's down in this heatsink a little bit, so you got to kind of squeeze it. You know, you could put a screwdriver down under here and it would come out easier, but you got more of a chance of scraping up the heatsink, right? Not a horribly big deal, but just soon not do it. And, well, there she is. Right, you got to make sure you bring this. Now this little mica insulator, sometimes I kind of stick to it, and this one looks like it is kind of stuck to it, but I'm going to move the transistor aside. And by the way too, if you look at the transistor pins, if you can see that, I don't know, but they're not centered exactly. You know, like here, the pins are a little higher up on this end. They're not quite in the center. So what this prevents you from doing is what? Turning it the wrong way and installing it the wrong way, right? So here, the pins are just offset a little to where if you try to put this in wrong, it just won't go. You'll break the pins off first. So that's a nice little feature that may help the people who aren't as experienced to do this. So as I said, I'll move him aside. There's a little mica insulator in here, and over the years, it kind of becomes part of the heatsink. You know, and I'm pulling on it here with my pick a little bit. I don't know if you can kind of see it coming up. And then, bang, there she is. What we want to do first, and then give it a moment to dry, we're going to clean the heatsink with some alcohol. All right. I've got some alcohol here that I just dipped my Q-tip in. And I'm going to take these power transistors, this side, and just clean them up. All right, just clean them, make it nice and clean. What I'll do now is get out a few of these insulators. And believe it or not, you know, these things, you got to kind of look at them, believe it or not. You think they'd all be perfect and good, and most of them are. But, you know, these things are you know, very, very thin, very, very fragile. And, you know, some of them may have cracks in them or just not quite, they're not quite perfect. And once again, these are, you know, a couple cents a piece. So, you know, it's not like if you got to throw away one or two. These look okay. I got 3 here right now. So what you do, I'm going to put the insulator up here and try to put my hands out here. I'm going to open my tube here of thermal compound. Just get some on my finger. And as I said, you don't need a lot. You know, that's the whole key. You don't need a lot. You know, I'll try to show you here on the back of the insulator, and then place it onto the power transistor. And this side we haven't done much, right? We've got a little bit of a mess over here on the side, and what you do is you just kind of set it in there. Actually, when you screw it in, it's going to set in, you know, but I just give it a little push, and that's all you got to do, you know. And this guy's just about ready to go. And what we'll do is put some more. I'm getting some more thermal compound as I'm talking along here. You get some more thermal compound, and once again, you don't need much. Just a little bit goes a hell of a long way. You know, you just want a very thin layer on the other side. And put this guy right back down in his socket, right? And we know it can only go one way. So let's see here. There we go. So you do that, right? 8 times is what you're going to have to do it. So there's one. Really not bad though, was it? Not really. You know, we'll screw him back in, and you want him snug and you want him tight, but you don't overdo it. Don't crank down on this like, you know, you don't want to ever have it come apart again. And I start them both, you know, that other one I just started, and you put them in evenly, right? You don't want to put one side down, even though it isn't going to really bother it. You want to even it out, right? A little bit of pressure, and, you know, as I said, you want them snug, but you just don't want to crank down on this. Looks like he'll probably go for another 45 years. I don't think we even have to touch that, and that looks pretty neat. But sometimes, you know, sometimes the thermal compound will come out more. And now, like I say, if you want, I gotta get up here and look around the edge. I can see a little bit of hazing on it. I mean, as I said, is this a little anal? Maybe. This transistor's got a better chance of lasting longer, because it's going to dissipate heat just like it was brand new now. So, you know the next step, I think. I won't show you all 8 of them, but that's how you go about it. And so now I'm going to keep going here and do the other ones. All 8 power transistors have been reseated with new insulators and new thermal compound. That new thermal compound now can get in those little imperfections in the metal, both in the heatsink itself and also in the transistor case. So it just transfers the heat a lot better. So we're about ready to reinstall them now. I'll now reinstall the driver assembly as well as the two heatsink power transistor assemblies. So all three of these are ready to go back in, and then we'll hook it up and give it a test. It goes back together just like it came apart. Remember, all the cables were marked, so that makes it easier. And you just want to double check your work once you get everything in there. Okay, we've got the left and right power output transistor and heatsink assemblies back in. We've got the driver card back in, and what are we going to do? We're going to give it a try, right? After we've done some work, make sure everything's still working. Got my trusty CD player here, and we're gonna give it a shot here. So let me come down here to our on-off switch in the front, and I'm gonna head and flicker on. Let's see what happens. Well, our protector light should be. It went green. That's good, huh? You can hear that speaker relay. That's always a sweet sound in an old piece of vintage audio equipment. So let's see if we've got some sound here. Oh, it would help if I'm on the phono, so it'd help if I took it to aux, wouldn't it? Oh, what do you know? Well, once again, we will play 1 second of that. I'll listen to it a little bit more than you guys will, make sure all is all right, but that's a pretty good sign. I could tell the left and the right channel were working. So I think we're good to go, and we're going to complete part 2 of the Sansui AU-9900 repair and restoration, and I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please leave me a big thumbs up down below. And if you're not a subscriber and you enjoyed this video, I certainly would appreciate if you became a subscriber. And you guys that are already subscribers, I really appreciate it and thank you. Y'all have a good day.